Taiji Chuan master Yang Banhao says, once you have achieved moving with awareness, then you will be able to identify energies. Once you can identify energies, then you will be able to be miraculous. But in the beginning of training, you should understand moving with awareness. Although it is innate, it is nevertheless hard to achieve within oneself. End quote. And that's courtesy of the amazing Brennan translations, which you can find online. And so in Yiquan terms, we know that from our Jijizhuang stance, we can employ open, close, rise and sink, linked together in unified whole body movement to generate an infinite array of possible techniques. And all these things are the interconnection of those four ways of using the Hua combined with hold the center. So in the old Chinese martial arts way of thinking, when people said, from the five elements everything else is created, well, this is what we mean by that. From those five elements alone, you can develop and train and express everything that you need to around, well, certainly in terms of stand-up striking skills. Watching anyone who can do this kind of movement, you can see immediately that the Hua and the torso above it, the legs below it, are following one movement paradigm. They're just rocking, open, close, rise and sink within the same exact precise movement paradigm, which links together the whole core of the body. And the arms just follow on, in the old Xing Yiquan saying, like spikes being hit by a mallet. And we can also see that open, close, rise and sink are all structurally sympathetic with one another. They're all parts of one dynamic use of dynamic force, as Wang Xianzhai puts it. Each flows naturally into the next in infinite possible combinations and ratios. But to get it takes some work, and to make that work quicker, we use standing pole. So let's begin by thinking about open, just breaking it down into open and thinking about the movement without even a technique, just the basic concepts of open. You can practice this just like I'm doing, just by feeling the posture, not even thinking about any kind of technique, just opening the Hua and the structure. And just by doing that, you can see that it's prior to technique, and you can also see the origin of slow movement, of Shi Li, just practicing breaking down one element like this. And from there you can physically hold the posture open, although I've freeze-framed it here. Hold the posture open like this, like it's a kind of zhuang in itself, and just get that feeling of what it feels like to freeze that movement of open, because that's what we're going to capture next within standing pole. But we also want to bring something else into that, because at this stage we're a little bit more advanced, so we want that feeling of open, but we also want to bring in this sense of screwing force, of twisting the whole body into that posture. So it's not just opening the body, it's screwing the arms in, getting that screwing force. And what we want to do is make that smaller and smaller, and then bring it down into our basic Jijizhuang posture. And here things get a little bit more complicated, because a lot depends on our actual level. So one of the things that we can do here is deliberately create that feeling, so kind of freezing the movement. Remember, I've talked about if you're pushing against a wall, you're not moving, but you still feel all that movement of pushing in your body. So you can do that deliberately, but quite relaxed. But for more advanced practice, particularly based around standing for longer periods, where we get that feeling where the whole body knits together, we can bring down the slider, if you like the volume slider, of actually physically using muscles to kind of push the movement forwards, and bring up instead the slider of intent. So thinking about open, thinking about the posture, and just trying to get it to trigger that sensation in the body. And then the trick then is to get that feeling as strong as possible, the more you can relax into it. And that's not that difficult. Remember, it's basic training, standing. So if you can stand, and if you can stand for a reasonable amount of time, 20 minutes plus, you can get this feeling no problem. And from there you can practice micro movements, but I want to move on to a particular kind of exercise. So remember that in the beginner series we did something where we just practiced relaxing and then moving into a basic punch with no pre-movement. Remember, that's key for each one. One of the things that we're after is this idea of no pre-movement, and understanding from there that when we're in Jijizhuang, we've already done most of the movement. We've done 70% of the movement just by being in that posture. But of course it works the other way with the cross as well. So it's just about being in that single weighted posture that gives you that, half the posture is already done, and you can just move into the next one without any pre-movement. because you can just twist around either the quad axis or the spine axis. You've already done the wind up, and then we use our whole body strength to put the power in, and of course, the way that the posture is rooted. And remember, that's called setting the posture, or in Wang Shengjai's terms, rebound energy. But now we want to extend that exercise, take it on to the next level. So instead of doing those micro movements from a completely relaxed posture, we're already holding this sense that we're using open. So we're not just holding the center, we're not in the fifth element, we're using open. It's frozen within our standing pole posture. And then we want to just start triggering some micro movements. And you can think of this specifically like micro Farley. So it's just like the tiniest little bit of Farley, just that movement, that initial trigger that's going to be expanded later into explosive movement. And because you're already holding that sense of open, it's a different kind of exercise than moving from direct relaxation. This is the basis of what we call hit and flow. So that's when you hit and then you immediately release force again without pulling back. So it's one of the things that we've looked at in depth in the beginner series. And it's critical to get this because in everything from push hands right the way through to full-on fighting, you're usually not completely relaxed because that's not very good defensively, and you can be in contact with the opponent, or you've got some kind of defensive tension and you need to be able to release force from that position. So finding that special balance and how that works is critical, and this really helps you develop that. And we know exactly where this kind of dynamic training leads to and what we want to get out of it. But I've demonstrated that plenty in push hands and sparring. Plenty more to come. So let's move on and think about doing exactly the same thing with close. So first of all, getting the feeling, doing it big, getting the feeling that you want, and then again, just making it smaller and smaller, getting the screwing force into it and capturing all of that, freezing it all in the moment of Jiji Zhuang. So remember, even though it looks like I'm just doing normal, holding the center, the feeling is there that I'm using close. I'm just making it much smaller. I'm just bringing it into my intention, or playing with the different kinds of ways of doing it, playing with the different movement. And also remember, you want all of the different elements in there. So even though you're holding the posture in stillness, you want the screwing force there, everything, the rooting, the feeling down into the floor. But also remember, you've got to play with this difference between just doing it with kind of muscular intention and then letting that go, getting the feeling of whole body unified force, holding the center, and then bringing in the intention, just bringing in the feeling and just trying to liminally trigger that feeling of close in the body, and then holding it, freezing movement within the actual posture. And that includes the legs, by the way, so you're going to feel the way that the legs twist and the muscles that are involved in using close or open or any of the postures that we're looking at. You should be feeling those as well, just in exactly the same way. And also feeling the way that it sets down into the floor, so feeling the push down into the floor, and then just hold the posture and capture that feeling. And as always, you've just got to keep checking that you're not just using brute force, i.e. you're not just tensing the muscles. That's not what it is. It's relaxing and triggering all of the nerves all over the muscles to get this overall feeling of everything knitting together towards this sense of movement within stillness. And once you've got that, then we can proceed on again into thinking about just the micro movement, just triggering the initial firing of the cross. And also notice again, it shouldn't look the same way as when you do it just from relax. When you do it just from relax, it looks like a sharper movement. But when you do it from holding this posture, it'll look a little bit more stilted in the movement. And you can compare with when I've done it other times where I'm just doing it from relaxed, completely relaxed posture. And you can see how much sharper it looks. And that's because we're using the visualization and the feeling that we're already pushing forwards into the cross. So there's already tension there in the body, so it's a much more difficult, it's not very difficult, but it's a more difficult exercise. From there we can do exactly the same thing with sync. It's a little bit different in that when we do sync, we're not just moving around the spine axis, so it makes it a little bit different. It's all in the the way that the legs just suddenly drops. And remember, we've talked about this idea of a compression set where you kind of drop your weight and then you tense the leg and it creates that compression set into the ground. But we drop suddenly. There's a little bit of twist down into it because that's how we create and push down particularly from the front leg, pushing down to kind of aid gravity a little bit. We looked at that when we looked at how to do a compression set, a big compression set with the legs. And for these postures, you can use some of the traditional visualizations like holding a tree and trying to plant it into the ground. And again, think about holding the feeling, not just in the arms and upper body, but in the whole body, in the legs. And you're trying to drop that tree. Just first of all, visualize you're trying to plant it, you're trying to push it down into the ground. And then later on, when we just use the micro movement, then you just imagine you kind of pounding it down into the ground. And you can see there's a little bit of twist on the movement. That's the way we use the front leg to just create that little twist. It's actually pushing back down into the back leg. And that's how we cheat gravity a little bit and just add a little bit of extra. Because it's difficult, obviously, just to drop straight down. So that's how we cheat it and just try and get a little bit of extra force in the drop down by twisting it a little bit, using a little bit of reverse spiral force. And from there, rise is just the same. You can still visualize that you lifting a tree, you're uprooting a tree this time. That's the traditional visualization. Very simple, just lifting it up out of the ground. So again, just capturing that sense and just holding it in stillness. And if you like, you can then start experimenting a bit, adding a little bit of more twisting with it. So imagining that you're rolling the log on your forearm, the tree on your forearms, as well as lifting it up. You can start expanding the exercise yourself.